It was a night of elegance, a night where the city's most influential figures gathered under the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Royal Ballroom. The room buzzed with laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the soft, refined melodies from a grand piano sitting at the center of the polished marble floor. Every eye was dressed in tuxedos and flowing gowns, every movement deliberate and practiced. It was an event for the elite, where appearances meant everything and belonging was measured not just by wealth, but by invisible lines drawn long ago. Marcus Evans, wearing a simple but well-tailored black suit, stepped into the hall, his heart pounding not from nerves but from a sense of duty. Music had been his life since childhood, but growing up, grand ballrooms like this one had been distant dreams. Tonight, he wasn't here by formal invitation, he had been working behind the scenes, helping tune the grand piano earlier that day. Yet something inside him whispered that tonight could be different, that maybe, just maybe, he belonged among those who had always looked through him rather than at him. As he walked slowly towards the piano, the chatter around the room began to die down. Curious glances turned into harsh stares. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. In a sea of opulence, Marcus was a ripple, a disturbance that could not be ignored. He reached out gently, his fingers barely brushing the keys, feeling the familiar vibration under his skin, when a sharp voice sliced through the heavy silence. "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" demanded a young man in a crisp, custom-tailored tuxedo. His name was Charles Whitmore III, heir to a vast fortune, and tonight, self-appointed guardian of the elite's invisible borders. His words, coated with disdain, echoed through the hall, drawing even more eyes toward the unfolding scene. Marcus turned slowly, meeting Charles's gaze calmly. "I was just admiring the instrument," he said quietly. Charles laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "Admiring? This isn't some street piano you can just touch. Step away before you embarrass yourself further." There was a low murmur of agreement from a few corners of the room. Others watched in silent discomfort, unwilling to intervene. Before I take you deeper into what happens next, if you believe everyone deserves a chance to prove their worth, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Stories like this show us why respect, talent, and courage are more powerful than any prejudice. Stay with us, you won't believe how this night transforms. Marcus glanced around the room. He could feel the judgment, the thinly veiled contempt pressing against his skin like a physical weight. He could have turned away. It would have been easier, safer even. But something inside him, something he had spent years forging through every hard-earned lesson, every closed door, and every bitter word, refused to back down. Without a word, Marcus sat down at the piano bench. The collective gasp from the audience was almost tangible. It was as if he had shattered a sacred, invisible rule, the kind that never needed to be spoken among those who enforced it. Charles stepped forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "Fine then," he sneered. "Play. Show us how out of place you really are." Marcus placed his fingers on the keys, closed his eyes, and let the world fall away. He began with a simple melody, soft and almost hesitant, like a whisper. The room, still holding its breath, listened. Then the notes grew richer, fuller, cascading through the air like a river breaking free from a dam. His hands danced across the keys, weaving a tapestry of sound that filled every gilded corner of the hall. The audience, which moments ago had been ready to laugh or scoff, found themselves rooted in place, unable to tear their eyes away. The sheer emotion in his music gripped them by the soul, dragging them into a world far beyond the polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, as if ashamed by their earlier assumptions. Others watched, mesmerized, as Marcus poured his heart into the piano with a passion so raw, so genuine, that it cut deeper than any speech ever could. And Charles? Charles stood frozen, his smirk wiped clean, replaced by a bewildered stare. For all his wealth and privilege, he realized in that moment that there were things he could never buy, and one of them was the kind of brilliance unfolding before him. As the final note lingered in the air, fading like a ghost into the stunned silence, Marcus slowly opened his eyes. The room remained silent for a beat longer, as if no one dared disrupt the spell he had cast. And then, slowly at first, a single pair of hands began to clap. An elderly man, seated near the front, his silver hair neatly combed, his posture dignified, rose to his feet, applauding with a steady, deliberate rhythm. Others followed, almost unwillingly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, until the entire hall was standing, a thunderous ovation filling the space where judgment had once lived. Marcus stood up from the bench, bowed his head humbly, and without a word, walked calmly toward the exit. He didn't need to stay and bask in the applause. He had already won. Not just the performance. Not just the respect. He had broken something much deeper, the illusion of superiority held by those who thought their lineage gave them power over the talents, dreams, and dignity of others. As Marcus disappeared through the grand double doors, many in the room remained standing, clapping long after he was gone, their hearts still echoing with the music he had left behind. But for Charles, the humiliation had only just begun. And for Marcus, a door had opened, not one they could ever again close. Outside the Grand Royale, the night air was crisp and silent. Marcus inhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift off his chest. He hadn't planned to perform, hadn't craved validation from those people, but he had reclaimed something priceless, his right to be seen, to be heard, on his own terms. Inside the ballroom, the applause eventually faded into a stunned murmur. Guests whispered among themselves, questioning their own behavior, feeling the sting of guilt that only truth can bring. The grandeur of the chandeliers, the golden trims, and the polished floors all seemed less dazzling now, as if the shine of their world had been dulled by a mirror they hadn't wanted to face. Charles stood rooted to the spot, his fists clenched at his sides. His embarrassment wasn't just public, it was profound. In front of everyone who mattered, he had revealed himself not as a leader, not as a symbol of the family legacy he had inherited, but as a small, insecure boy, terrified of being eclipsed by someone he had dismissed without a second thought. As the night dragged on, Charles tried to reclaim some semblance of authority. He joked, he laughed too loudly, he criticized the evening's proceedings. But it was no use. The damage was done. The guests, many of whom had once pandered to him, now saw him differently. His aura of superiority had cracked, and through that crack, the truth had shined. Meanwhile, Marcus's story spread beyond the walls of the Grand Royale. Someone had captured a video of his impromptu performance. By morning, the clip was everywhere, social media, news sites, even morning talk shows. "Unknown pianist stuns elite gala," the headlines read. But for Marcus, it was never about fame. It was about the quiet dignity of standing tall when others try to push you down. About answering arrogance not with anger, but with excellence. About refusing to be defined by the expectations of a world too small to contain his talent. Opportunities began pouring in. Invitations to perform, to record, to teach. But Marcus chose carefully. He didn't want to be a curiosity or a symbol used to cleanse the conscience of those who had once doubted him. He wanted to build something lasting, something real. Within months, Marcus founded a music academy dedicated to nurturing underrepresented talent, a place where young musicians who might never set foot in ballrooms like the Grand Royale could learn, grow, and shine without apology. His story inspired thousands. It reminded people that greatness doesn't come with a pedigree or a price tag. It comes from within, forged in silence, tested in adversity, and revealed when least expected. As for Charles, he faded from the spotlight. His family's reputation, once ironclad, took a hit that money couldn't repair. Investors and partners began to distance themselves quietly, uncomfortable with the growing association of his name with elitism and bigotry. In the circles where power and reputation mattered most, Charles learned the hard way that respect is earned, not inherited. Years later, at another gala, a fundraiser for Marcus's academy, a familiar, now much older figure stood silently at the back of the hall, unnoticed by most. Charles watched as Marcus, now a celebrated figure, spoke not with bitterness, but with grace about the importance of opportunity, dignity, and the unstoppable power of dreams. He clapped politely when the speech ended, but deep down, he knew he was clapping for a man he could never be, not because he lacked money, but because he lacked the strength of character. In the end, Marcus's greatest triumph wasn't the ovation that night at the Grand Royale. It wasn't the viral fame or the academy he built. His greatest triumph was never letting someone else's ignorance define his worth. He had answered hate not with hatred, but with greatness. And in doing so, he hadn't just changed his own life, he had changed countless others as well. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about resilience, dignity, and transformation. And if you've ever been underestimated or judged unfairly, share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters, and together we can inspire even more change.